jamming. Hey, thanks for being here, Dave.
Happy to be here. Good to see
It's
you.
good to see you again, man. I haven't been to Jenny's in a minute, so Bend is kind of hard to get to in the wintertime, as you can imagine,
Sure.
from Portland. So, but I'm excited to talk to you about that, about some of your career. Welcome everyone to the My Two Pesos podcast. This is a podcast I started to be able to have a little bit more in-depth conversations than the conversations I'm having over at Ponytails. And so Dave is a person that I've interviewed a couple times actually already for our other podcast. Go check it out. It's about our time when we sold books door to door. And if you want to hear those stories, go check those out. I mean, Dave Rosen is a legendary person in that regard in our history of the Southwestern company that we both worked for. But that's definitely for the Ponytails podcast. This is going to be a little different. For you, those of you who don't know or who didn't catch the intro, because sometimes people will skip the intro, quick background on Dave. Dave, after leaving Southwestern, got involved in politics and worked with the Clintons as a campaign fund manager. And eventually, we're going to hear the story about all of the things that happened there. And eventually is now currently working in the cannabis industry. And we'll hear about Jenny's and his company later on. So make sure you stick around for that in case you skip the intro, because sometimes people just skip it. So we'll just let them know here. So let's dive in. Is that cool, Dave? We'll just jump right into
Sure. Let's go.
thing. So I guess, okay, let's just walk into how you got involved with the Clintons in the first place. Let's just go chronologically. You leave Southwestern. How did you start getting into politics? How did you kind of start getting involved in with like someone who's going to be the president of the United States?
Well, I'd say it's hard to do. There's a reason that young people work in politics, because we work them 80 hours a week and they move across the country. And so it's very difficult. So a lot of times we end up with senators' children, governors' children, large contributors' kids, because they can afford to work for free. It's a lot like Hollywood, the way you get in. A lot of times you have to volunteer first. Where you get to know everybody, build relationships, and then finally you get a paid gig. That's how it is in politics. So I had just finished selling books, and I took a job selling books to lawyers, and I sold law books to lawyers, and my territory was the Chicago area out to the Quad Cities. And I started selling to lawyers, and I thought, maybe I should be a lawyer. I said, okay, I'll go be a lawyer. And so I went to DePaul, and I said, how long until I'm a lawyer? And the counselor came back and said, well, 2 years until you have an undergraduate degree. Now, I sold books a little bit longer than the average Joe. I sold for 10 summers, and I would move and transfer credits and change majors. And so I had accumulated a lot of college credit, but not all in one place. So I sucked it up and I did it. And I said, okay, let's go get the undergrad first. And I thought the fastest way to law school would be political science. So I studied political science, and boy, I started having these great professors and reading this amazing stuff. And I really got the bug for politics, just the enterprise, the career, as a career. I got really interested in how laws were made and how campaigns were run. And in my last quarter there, David Wilhelm taught a class. And David Wilhelm was the former chair of the Democratic National Committee. And he was Mayor Daley's campaign manager and President Clinton's campaign manager. So he teaches this class at DePaul. I'm about to graduate. It's my last quarter. And we had really famous people come in and speak, like George Stephanopoulos and wow. James Carville and Dee Dee Myers, and one after another. It was quite amazing. And that cemented my belief that I needed to get into this game and get into politics. So after the class was over, I went to see David Wilhelm, and I told him, this is what I want to do. And he said, okay. And I got a volunteer job on a congressional campaign through him, and volunteer meaning work for free. So I was doing that and gaining great experience. And then we won that race. And then I moved on to a volunteer position on the re-election for President Clinton.
That's wild.
And I'm running out of money. And they had me volunteering on the campaign, and they said, well, why don't you go and enter this data? Data entry is still a big part of campaigns. I was terrible at the data entry. And after 8 hours, my boss said, "You're terrible at this. Can you just take this list and invite some people to a fundraiser?" I was quite good at that.
Yeah.
And so I ended up raising a lot of money for that fundraiser, and that became my career kind of path in politics. You can work in field, you can work in opposition research, you can work in campaign fundraising, which is what being a finance director is. So that's what led me to fundraising and political fundraising. So I did that for a long time. That's how I got in. They couldn't pay me, and so I ran out of money, and so I went and sold books for 10 weeks, and made a lot of money in 10 weeks. And then I came back and I met the campaign in Texas, where they finally hired me for $17,900.
Wow. I mean, in the 90s, that was a little better than it is today, but
It wasn't much.
Still not much. Oh, wow. So, okay. Was the ambition right away from the beginning, like, I'm just going to do whatever it takes to get to the top? Or did you have a specific goal? Or did you ever think that you were going to reach such heights that you ended up reaching?
The luck of the draw. I ended up working on an incumbent presidential campaign, and it's tremendous experience. But once you've done that, I've done 3 presidentials. I've done a lot of Senate and gubernatorial races and a lot of House races since then. It's great experience. No, I didn't cut out to work for the president of the United States and pinch me. I know him and I know lots of others and have met, all of the Democratic presidents over the last, 20 years, 25 years. So yeah, that part of the experiential part is quite incredible. Young people in this country are really treated as unwanted adults, which is why the Southwestern internship is so cool. That when you do sell books during the summertime, you run your own business, you take care of your own inventory, your own expenses, your taxes. So you really learn, you get to practice as an undergraduate on things that make matter. And it helped me tremendously in politics.
That's fascinating that, there's that you've met so many of the people who have been major players in the Democratic side of politics, and probably also in the Republican side of politics. But as you think back and you remember and you recall all these things, how did it feel as it was happening? Like, like the first time you met Bill Clinton must have been a crazy experience. I mean, you're meeting the president of the United States of America. Like, what was that? What was that feeling?
I still don't take it for granted. If I were to see him today, he would recognize me. I would recognize him. Wow. I would say, "Mr. President." It's. I think it's a lot like Hollywood. I don't work in Hollywood, but I think that you get, as a staffer, you're comfortable talking to senators and governors and, yes, presidents. There's a etiquette. You're using titles. You're formal. You're prepared. And that's why it's kind of cool as a young person to learn, to be prepared. I briefed the president one-on-one maybe 100 times. This would be about who's in the next room, who are we going to meet, how much money was raised at the fundraiser, who did a lot of the work. He would ask questions, I would be prepared, and then we would go out and he would give a speech and we would do a photo receiving line. So yeah, you don't take it for granted. I've been in some really cool places and seen a lot of cool things. You pinch yourself. A lot of this was when I was younger too. So now I really appreciate those times.
Yeah. What do you think that, I guess the better question is, what are some of the things about politics, since you were in you were in the middle of it, the thick of it, especially later on. What are some of the things about politics that people don't quite understand, or like maybe the media maybe purposely or unintentionally, throws a misconception of how it works, or like how the world, maybe they watch too much West Wing or something, what I'm saying? Too much House of Cards. Well, what are some inaccuracies or misconceptions that the public has about how politics work?
I don't want to, comment on misconceptions. Let me just say what it is.
Yeah.
That it's where you can do the most amount of good in a democracy. In this democracy, if you work in politics, you can affect the most amount of people, and it actually affects your daily life. So marijuana has been used as a discriminatory tool for, since the 70s.
Yeah.
And locking up, filling up our prisons, locking up the wrong people for low-level drug offenses, and locking up largely black and brown people. So our prisons are filled with half of our prisons. We lock up more people in the United States than any other industrialized country. And most of those are black and brown, and most of those or half of them are for low-level drug offenses, making it too full to actually take care of serious crimes and criminals that should be in there. So that's just one issue, that if cannabis were legal federally, it would no longer be able to be used as a discriminatory tool. And even though it's better that 40 states have a medical program, that 26 states have an adult use program, but there's still 10 states that you go to jail if you're caught with a joint.
Yeah.
And so that's just one issue, but there's so many issues. Let's take gay marriage for one. That deeply affects individuals and their lives. The right to choose, the right to healthcare, women's healthcare. These things happen because of one vote, two votes. The Affordable Care Act was passed by one vote, and millions of people access this wonderful program. So what's that if more people understood how important it was, more people would vote. And if more people voted, then we would get better representation.
I see.
And
So you're saying the biggest thing to understand about politics is that for the people that might have lost faith in the ability to vote and the right to vote, who just go, oh, I'm not going to vote, it doesn't matter anyway. That actually, quite the opposite. It's every vote does count. The impact.
It really does. And these races are going to be close for the next, 8, 12, 16 years, where they're down to a few thousand votes or tens of thousands of votes in each state, which is a small margin.
Yeah.
So voting is the power that beats corruption. Voting is the power that beats bad policy. Voting is the power that beats gerrymandered districts. And so the reason you ended up with gerrymandered districts is not enough people vote. And so they're able to play games and draw things. But if we didn't like our politicians, we could throw them out of office. That's the true power. And it's happened. So, look at Santos just recently. He was booted out of office because he's kind of a scumbucket. But you can unelect people every 2 years. The people closest to the people are elected every 2 years. So if you don't like it, you vote. And really, if you don't vote, you don't have much room to complain. Now, I think that voting should be made easier. In many states this cycle, you can vote in person 8 days before Election Day. That's helpful. Voting in the mail. I think in today's society where everything is online and safe, we do banking online. If we can't vote online and keep that secure and have a paper record of the votes, I think, making it easier, having it on a holiday, a voting day instead of a Tuesday when working people have to take off work to vote, or having it on a weekend. So I think that there are two ways to win an election. One is to get more people to vote, and the other is to get less people to vote, to suppress the vote, and then you win with a small amount. So, making it more difficult for voting makes it more difficult for you to turn out your people.
Yeah.
So, I think that voting is the key. If you look at some of these other democracies, they voted a higher percentage. We used to, around wars or other important times in our country, we would vote at 80%. But we're down to just over 50.
That's wild.
So 55% of the country. So things can happen when only a few people vote, or we have 40% of the country or more not voting. That's where you get bad policies. That's where you get the extremes in politics. And really, most of the people in the country are in the middle.
Yeah.
They're not extreme right. They're not extreme left. They're in the middle. They believe in, some fiscal responsibility, and they believe in some social liberalism and giving people rights to their own bodies and to who they love. But most of the people are smack in the middle. So 70, 75%. So by not voting, we let these extreme of both parties hijack policy and government, and therefore those important things that do impact, the daily lives of citizens.
That's a wow. Well put. Well put, Dave. I mean, that's exactly right. And I lived in Nebraska, which is pretty conservative, and then now I live in Portland, which is probably as liberal as it can get, maybe. And I've seen what you're saying is absolutely true. There are the extremes. I've seen them on both sides at both places I lived, but most people are right in the middle. And those are the people that don't vote, it feels like, because.
Well, I think there's another problem, and that's that some of the obstacles that I mentioned, it being on a work day, we're busy. And we're busy. Why? You used to be able to be supported by one household, one person working in a household.
Yeah.
They'd work at the same job for 25 years. You'd be able to pay off a mortgage. You'd be able to go on vacation for a couple of weeks a year and really not need for anything. Now we're so busy that there's a lack of contemplative time. So you get in the car to drive the kids before you go to work, and you listen to one radio station, and that's what you get. They call the siloization of news and information. So we only listen to something that reinforces our existing belief. We don't listen to other people or other sides. When I grew up, there was the news. It wasn't a right news or a left news. It was the news, and you got, the local news, and then you got the national news. And since, cable and others, the siloization is you just listen to Fox News, or you just listen to MSNBC, or you just read the New York Times, or you just read the New York Post, and so that becomes more difficult because of the polarization. But the lack of contemplative time and keeping us on a gerbil wheel. It's much harder to pay our bills now. It's much harder to get a mortgage now. You need more money to live, and so less time do you have to think about who might be better. So oftentimes we vote against our best interests because we're too busy to vote, or we're too busy to find out who to vote for. You're intimidated by all the judges and things on the ballot, and you get used to not voting, and it's just easier. You feel again that my vote doesn't count. So I understand how it happens. It's just super important.
There's like a friction of convenience, right? Where people go, who's got the fucking time to vote, essentially, right? Who's got the time to go?
Who can leave their job and go do it? And you're busy already.
Yeah.
Every minute, there doesn't seem to be enough hours in the day to pay the bills, to raise your kids, to cook dinner.
Yeah.
So let alone have this day where you have to kind of go vote. But like in this primary, is there really a reason to turn out for Joe Biden when you know he's going to win? And so it's the true diehards that come out and they just vote every time because they vote.
Yep.
But a lot of people didn't vote because they knew who was going to win. There's really not any opposition.
Right.
So again, being in the habit of voting, but it's shame on the government for not making it easier to vote. It's hard to tell citizens to vote. It's a habit. You have to. I teach my kids. It's a thing. It's important. It's your civic responsibility. But I do understand how most people don't understand how it works at all.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we're trying to address here, right? And along with that, I mean, it seems that this is the case for. You talked about the hamster wheel, like keeping us on a hamster wheel, but we've had presidents from both parties in the last 20 years that you've mentioned it getting more and more difficult to vote. So it doesn't even seem to be like a Republican thing to keep people from voting or a Democrat thing to keep people from voting. And it seems to be across the board, like it's just harder to vote regardless of who's president or what party's in charge right now. And that's a fascinating thing to look at because you would imagine that it would have been like one side or the other, but it just seems to be, it doesn't matter.
I want to keep this positive. I don't want to, but I believe that corporate interests play a giant role in politics. And it's what our framers were afraid of. And there was a court decision called Citizens United that allows companies and corporations to give to politics. And they didn't used to be able to. And furthermore, they're able to fund these campaigns anonymously, which wasn't allowed before either. So now an individual contributor who gives, $25 to a political campaign doesn't have that much sway when there's 7-figure and 8-figure contributions happening from corporate interests.
Yeah.
And so we have been hijacked by corporate interests.
Yeah.
And so whoever pays for the ad, advertising works. And so I think whether it's the right or the left, whether it's a Democrat or Republican, the corporations want to do well.
Yeah.
They want the rules to stay the same. And so they'll fund ads on both sides in order to benefit their economic interests. Here's the problem. There's been a huge disparity between the rich and the poor, and it's only been increasing over the last 40 years. And so there's a real decrease of good jobs, high-paying jobs that offer benefits, high-paying jobs that offer health insurance. So there's been a decrease of those, and therefore the decrease of the middle class. But millionaires and billionaires, their real income has gone up 500, 600%, where the average hourly worker hasn't gone up at all. Yeah. And so you've created this great chasm. So the folks, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the only way we're going to stop that dynamic is by unelecting some people and changing policy. And so, yeah, if you don't like what's going on, vote, and we can make a big difference in just some of these simple policies that allow us to make more in hourly wages, or to make sure that health insurance is included, or daycare is included in our jobs.
Yeah. I mean, and I don't think, yeah, that's pretty, you did a great job of keeping that positive. So I appreciate that. I do like that. But damn, man, that is, I mean, I guess we could go down this tangent for hours. So I'll keep moving along and you know, how politics have shaped you and kind of gear back towards your career. So, now you're starting to have, you know, a pretty regular role or a pretty significant role in this campaign run in with Bill Clinton. So your job develops once he gets elected. How does your job change at that point? Is it the same or?
Well, these businesses are funny. They all go out of business. So the election's over. You raise and spend millions of dollars, and then you're homeless and without a job. In fact, if you try to get a mortgage or a car loan outside of Washington, D.C., no one understands. You can't hold down a job. You keep leaving in this job. Why do you keep quitting?
Oh, that's
and
wild.
So you only work for a year here and 2 years here and 1 year here. In Washington, D.C., they understand that, and you're okay. Wow. Yeah. What was the question again?
Well, no, it's just like how did your career then develop? So that, you know,
Clinton gets reelected. Once it's over, you get another gig and you get interviewed, and eventually you reach, you know, how many presidentials can you do? Then some of us become where we can take other clients. We can take 2 clients, 2 campaigns, 3 campaigns. And then you start a consulting company, and then you try to hire other people to work with you to help you with those campaigns. But I was President Clinton's finance director, Al Gore, General Clark, Hillary Clinton, Governor Davis, Governor Vilsack, Governor Cuomo, 30 members of Congress. So no, I did the same job for lots of people. They were all Democrats. And I got to meet a lot of corporate CEOs and important people. And I've been in a lot of important places. Like I've been on Air Force One and Air Force Two, and man, you know, all this cool stuff. Yeah. So you just keep moving around in politics, and as you move up, you gain expertise. You know, at that point, there's the most expensive Senate race in history. You know, you get recruited based on your reputation, because it's a small club. And then you decide if you want to do this job or that job, or who needs you the most.
Huh. Okay. Unimportant question, but tangentially important. How are the cookies on Air Force One?
I didn't eat any cookies on Air Force One.
Damn it.
I did take the M&Ms, which is now the cool thing to have. You know,
wow.
You want a lot of tchotchkes, you know, go to the bathroom and steal the napkins. And M&Ms is one of the good stuff.
Do you still have some napkins from Air Force One?
I do. I have some really cool stuff from the White House and other cool places I've been.
What's your favorite souvenir that you picked up where you were in politics, do you think? Or the first one that comes to mind?
You know, I got a beer mug from Camp David.
That's yes. That's for a special day.
Not a lot of people have been to Camp David.
That is so cool. Wow. All right. Well, damn. Okay. So here's a big question. Let's get to it. So anybody that Googles you and with the word Clinton will find articles about your arrest and eventual acquittal from politics. Right? So let's just go into the details of what happened. I've asked you this before, but we kind of had to we were moving along. So if you could give me as much details as you want as to what happened that led up to your arrest.
Well, I can avoid my therapy session this week, so that's helpful.
Yes, how does that make you feel?
Politics was never a game of beanbags. It's always a replacement for violence. It's a replacement for war. So to be political means you're not shooting each other. It means you're arguing with words and not bullets. But it can be pretty rough and tumble. And I think that probably starting with about Newt Gingrich, we used to be more cordial. We used to argue with each other, Democrats and Republicans, and then we'd go out to dinner, or then we'd go on the retreat. Our kids would grow up with their kids. We knew their families and their spouses, and we interacted personally. That's not so much anymore, and so it really causes the otherness. I'm a firm believer in my wisdom of age that the other side is not my enemy. That these words that are mean, the way you argue matters, and civil discourse and professional language should carry the day, and I think will fix a lot of the problems. But that's not the question you asked. So, when the Attorney General is appointed, not elected, so whoever wins the election, Democrat wins, they appoint an Attorney General. A Republican wins, they appoint an Attorney General. That Attorney General is supposed to be the lawyer for the people, all people. Unfortunately, and we've seen this fast forward to today, that can have a political whiff to it. And in other countries, third world countries, we use the power of the state. They use the power of the state to go after their political enemies. Shame on you. You're not supposed to do that. But it happens. So I'm not going to talk much about this. I'll whip through it.
Sure.
And just to say that no one was going after me, right? I worked for then the First Lady, who became a United States Senator. But people wanted to stop her from becoming a United States Senator. And when you work for presidents and senators and governors, there's powerful enemies. And if they can dig up and through opposition research, they will, and they'll use that against you in a campaign. If they can create some opposition research, they'll try to affect that too. So I'd say that I got caught up in an attack on her. And I was accused, I threw a fundraiser, a large fundraiser in Hollywood. And it was hosted by a bunch of important people. And what happens when someone wants to host an event for someone so important, we run a background check on those people. Who are you? Why do you want to do this? What's your capacity? And the host of this event passed all the background checks. I was assigned to do it as a staffer. We did these events with this group. And it turns out after the campaign that the group was using that activity to make their stock price go up. It's called a pump and dump. So they would sell stock at a higher price. They would say all sorts of things are going to happen. And then they would sell that stock, short sell that stock. And so they were doing illegal things as a company. No one knew it. And then after the campaign, they got in trouble. And and after the event, so the event was a huge success. It raised a lot of money. It had a lot of Hollywood stars attend to it. It was just tremendous, a good event. After that happened, the FBI closed down, the Justice Department closed down this company that hosted the event. And the head of the company ran to Brazil and said, yes, I did steal this money from the company, but I threw this event for the Clintons, and it didn't cost this amount of money to throw the party. It cost a lot more, and I have the receipts, and David Rosen's lying that it cost only so much. So the charge was under-reporting the expenses of a fundraising event.
Damn.
So there was no, in the alleged underreporting, there was no victim. I didn't benefit that's like throwing an event at your house and I leave and I call you up and I go, how much did it cost? And you go, it cost $3,000. And I say, well, what about that third bottle of wine? Oh yeah, 31. We just get the information from the host as staffers. The staff tells us how much, and we write that down and we report that, and that gets reported. So it's not normal to underreport expenses because most people want the campaigns to say, I did this for you and I did that for you. And so if someone's hiding expenses, that's quite odd. But no one's set up to investigate that. How much did it cost? It cost X. So the charge, but again, Mrs. Clinton didn't benefit from that alleged underreporting. No one benefited from it. The charge was really just the public's right to know the accurate number. Normally, that would have been handled with just a new filing. People make mistakes every quarter. All these things have to be filed every quarter. So it's a campaign finance report. You can look it up right now on fec.gov. This all has to be reported every quarter. And normally you would just do an amended report. If there was new expenses that came in, you would just amend the report. And no, because she was so powerful and they wanted to make a deal out of it, they indicted me. So when you say arrested, indicted is a nice word of saying it. Eventually you have to go in and be booked.
I misspoke. Yeah, I should have said it.
Well, no, I was arrested as well. So you're indicted, but then you walk in and you get your fingerprints and so I did have to do that. And so I had a choice. I could settle or I could go to trial. And I went to trial. And it was a 17-day trial. I had to prove that I didn't know about the alleged underreporting if there was underreporting.
Right.
And but the real world consequences was I was facing 4 counts of 5 years. So it was 20 years in jail. So
Damn.
What normally would be a simple amendment of a report turned out to be a big deal. The theory is that if I get arrested and convicted, then that would hurt the people that I work for.
Yeah.
And that would ruin their chances of running. As it turns out, nowadays the people are more forgiving.
Yeah.
But
nowadays,
but at that time, it seemed to be a career ender.
Oh my gosh.
I fought them, and I went to trial, which is, I made the decision to go to trial. I was acquitted in 3 hours, and it was, a 17-day case. But once the jury got the case, they understood it right away, and I was acquitted. Thank goodness. Again, this all happened to me as a pretty young person.
Yeah.
But I was facing real world consequences and some powerful enemies.
No doubt. I mean, clearly. But okay, so some details. What year was this?
2000.
So it was in 2000. Yeah. And okay, so just to put myself in, I
call it 2005.
Yeah.
2005.
Well, just curious on what you experienced. Like, what did it feel like when the FBI is the one that took you in, or who came and grabbed you?
Yeah. So they didn't perp walk me, but they did execute a search warrant, and they knocked on my door, and 17 agents came in and took every piece of paper in my office that had anything to do with the case. Yeah, lots of terrible things happened before that actually happens. You try to tell them, don't file these charges. I'm completely innocent. Here's all the proof that I'm completely innocent. And it goes back and forth. It's the power of government is tremendous. I'm the most innocent guy in the room. Like I said, because they went through every check, all of my credit cards, everything I'd ever done in my life. And I came out with a very fast acquittal and really, proven innocent. But yeah, you don't sleep well when you have to go to trial when it gets down to the phrase, we, the people of the United States, find the defendant not guilty.
Let's go. Wow. So, okay. How did you feel like as it was all happening? I mean, because when they took you in, you had to get your fingerprints. Were you Were you thinking, oh, just watch him, I'm gonna show him how innocent, like, because you knew that you had done nothing wrong,
No,
and so
no,
like,
you know, I had enough training with strategy that you still have to run your own defense too, right? They had an argument. They even their evidence was all made up of hearsay from felons,
right.
but they still had an argument. There's still a strategy. I had to make decisions like, was I going to testify or not? Most of the time you don't testify in your own trial, and the times you do, you lose. By the way, 98% of people that are indicted end up being convicted and going to jail.
Yeah.
So I'm a 2%er when it comes to that. But no, what was I thinking? I was engaged in the moment. I was deciding what I thought the jury would be important for the jury to hear. And I thought it would be super important for the jury to hear from me.
Yeah.
And so, in opening statements, we said that you're going to hear from me. And so it left a little bit of open-mindedness in the jury's mind that they, no matter what the other side said, that they would finally get to hear from me and they could decide whether they believe me or not.
That's bananas. So from the first day of trial, how are you feeling? Nervous, or you probably felt really prepared? Like, it was still probably nerve-wracking. I mean, I can't imagine.
It's all very nerve-wracking, but once again, you just try to. The good thing about not having to remember a lie,
yeah, that's because
you're not. You're just telling the truth, so it's easier to do. You're not trying to be. You're just answering questions. There's a strategy about not being too emotional, and but I testified for 9 hours. So yeah.
That's wild. And then when you get the not guilty, I mean, what is that relief like? Is there anything that you can compare that? I mean, is it like?
It was a good one. There was articles written about that too. So they're all good.
Yeah.
I had faith in democracy. What happened to me was I was attacked. The system took hold. A jury of my peers heard the case and decided that I was innocent. It worked. So I was extremely happy. My mother was very, very happy.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, man, that's wild. I mean, I remember you mentioned at one point that like you were like on CNN, like the
At one time, I was the top ticker on CNN. They used to have the scrollers on the bottom, and I was the number one in the country. The Hannity and Combs would talk about me. I had 160 hours of non-duplicative TV taped. I kept all my media just to keep track of it. So yeah, it was quite a thing. It was more than 20 years ago, and deeply impactful in my life. And how do I feel afterwards? It restored faith. Like I said, that the institutions held, even though they might have been challenged, they held, and the right thing happened, and I was thrilled. I got to go on, have a good career after that.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna say, so then that happens, and then was that the end for you in politics, or did you continue? And before we transition into the cannabis conversation, there's a couple more things about the aftermath that I want to ask you about. But specifically, I guess, or first off, what happens after? Like, you get home and you're like, I'm never doing this again, or what was your mentality?
Well, the problem is that the newspaper articles are no longer interested in me. CNN is no longer interested in me. No one's running a big sign that says innocent. No one said, I got 1 day acquitted. And
That's it.
Coincidentally, I was acquitted at the same time as Michael Jackson. And so I was buried on like page 10.
Dave, who?
So, right. So it really my acquittal went under the radar. No one really noticed it. What they remembered was all the media and all the hype leading up to a trial. So it did reputational damage to me for sure. And it took me a while to get my career back. No, I didn't come from a wealthy home. My career was a finance director in politics, and I finally, convinced a few campaigns to take a chance on a finance director who had been indicted and acquitted. And I worked my way back up, and finally, I got back to the level that I was at, and I was recruited to work on a governor's race, and let's just say I had an extra pepper in my step,
Yeah,
and made sure that we won, and made sure that we had enough money, and we did, and we did. And then after that race, I went into business. So I wanted to put a cherry on my career and say, you didn't beat me. I left. I still am very active in politics, and I'm still super active on the issue, and not just on cannabis, but I still interact with United States senators and governors and members of Congress on a weekly basis.
that's it's like you can take the man out of politics, but you can't take the politics.
Well, it's
out
a
of the man.
club. It's like we talked about that summer club that we were in. There's 100,000 alumni that are part of that club, including a lot of politicians.
Yes, actually, very much. Now the Speaker of the House is one of those.
I was his student manager. I was.
I think I knew this actually.
Yeah.
And I you know who I just met with David Caldwell was with
Sure.
down in
I know David.
DR.
He's great.
He
Yeah.
came to Bizzler with us for the podcast too.
Yeah.
By the way, you're more than welcome to. But that's wild. It's so cool to interact and as an alumni of that program to just interact and see how people's careers develop to get to that point. Marsha Blackburn. She's Senator
Rick Perry,
Perry.
Ken Starr, lots of famous people. Yeah.
Kevin Stitt in Oklahoma. But yeah, that's awesome. By the way, if you get the Speaker of the House to just come on to the My Two Pesos, you tell him he's always welcome.
Sure, he'll be on tomorrow, Andres. No problem.
You tell him I know. You say, hey, this guy, he's gonna ask you some questions.
No problem. I'm sure he's got plenty of time.
He's got nothing going on. So, damn man, that's wild. Okay, so more reflective questions 20 years later now, as far as did you? I mean, it sounded like you gained a lot of faith in the system instead of kind of losing faith in the system, which is kind of not what you would expect from the experience that you had. But is there any other perspective changes that you went through, before this event?
I think that maybe it's similar if someone gets really sick, gets cancer or AIDS or something terrible like that. A lot of people will run away from you. A lot of your friends and family that you were close to might run away. And, once I was indicted, that happened to me. People ran away, and they didn't believe I was innocent, or they believed whatever they heard. And that was, disappointing, but enlightening and motivating and surprising was that people I barely knew contributed to my legal defense fund. People that I barely knew helped me get through those really tough times, and I was able to raise enough money to pay for the attorneys, and that's really the difference between being able to defend yourself or just being guilty, is the money that it cost. Like I said, I didn't come from a wealthy home. So people had to contribute with great risk to a legal defense fund. And so, it was a clarifying moment. Some of my, very best friends on this planet are people that saved me at that moment and actually ended up investing in cannabis later on.
Later on. Yeah. Wow. That's wild. And I guess those are my follow-up question was going to be, what are some other positives that came from that experience? But it sounds like that was another one. And I guess lastly, one of the things I wanted to know is, as you reflect back, is there anything that you would do different now, knowing what you know, given what happened, or would you just do it all over again?
I think that if I were given the choice now of whether to take a deal or go to trial and risk 20 years in jail, I might not do it.
Wow.
And I think the right decision was to fight them. So I have 4 kids. Do I really want to risk not seeing them grow up? So destiny favors the bold. And when I was a young man, I was able to stand on principle and don't really believe you can't fight City Hall. The truth mattered. Having the gumption and the chutzpah to stand up for your integrity, has seen me through a lot of tough times. So Not really answering your question, what would I have done differently then? But I could have made different decisions now with more to lose.
Yeah, that makes more. I mean, that makes sense. Actually, that does answer my question. It's a wise answer actually, and it speaks to the experience that you have and dealing with different risks in your life, and that's amazing, man. That's inspiring. I like that you said that the truth prevailed. I mean, at the end of the day, that is what happened. An innocent man was acquitted of something, and that's what you live to see. That's what you want to see.
It's what a trial is.
Yeah.
You're supposed one truth, another truth, and out comes the truth.
Yeah.
One makes an argument, someone else makes an argument, and then there's an arbiter there, a judge and a jury, who decide, okay, we believe this is the truth.
Yeah. And it worked. That's so cool. Because often you hear about how it doesn't go that way or outside influences can impact it. So your story is one of like, hey, this is an example of sometimes it just works.
But most people would have taken a deal. Right?
Yeah,
I would
no
have had
doubt.
to, would have affected my career. I would have had to, plead guilty to a felony. It would have been all these terrible things that would have happened to me. And so, as a young person, I was facing 20 years in jail, and I still went forward. That's the real decision that took, a high risk tolerance.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh my gosh, man. That's wild. And then the story gets even more fun. So,
well, going with the risk tolerance, it led us into an industry, led me into an industry. After my last campaign, where we elected that governor, friends of mine came to me and said, why don't we start a business? And we did. And I ended up buying them out, and I have, a lot of the stock and a lot of my life savings invested in the cannabis space. And that was 10 years ago. So, yeah, it seems amazing that it's been legal for that long, at least in the states, state by state, not federally legal. But it was an entrepreneurial exercise. And the idea was that if you had a license, let's just say you had a liquor license before prohibition was lifted, after it was lifted, you do pretty well. Yeah. In fact, the sports betting companies, they all had licenses offshore. They weren't legal in the U.S. And now they're, $40-50 billion industries now that they are legal.
Yeah.
Like cannabis, it took longer than expected and cost a lot of money to keep those businesses alive. And many of those businesses closed before they saw the actual legalization. That's the state of cannabis.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive right into that then. Let's dissect this onion. So I guess first of all, what specifically attracted you about cannabis? Like, that right, what you just said, the upside because of the nature of being right before the prohibition is a giant upside. But were there any other things, maybe besides economics, that you were like, this is going to be a good choice for me?
Well, I thought it would be an amazing thing, an exercise again to take a business that was illegal, legal. Just the challenge of just doing that alone, but more than that, on a policy level, I was like I said, we've been jailing the wrong people for a long time, and the fact that we can make this legal and available for everybody, and it helps a lot of people with a lot of their disease states, whether that's I can't sleep or anxiety or certainly from chemotherapy to retain appetite. But the important point is that cannabis has been legal for 10,000 years. It's only been illegal since 1973. So
yeah.
every religious institution has cannabis ashes in its altar, and the migration of it, and every grandmother has a tea or a salve from cannabis, and all the hemp that's been grown and used for lots of things like textiles or building materials now. So it's been around forever. Only when we wanted to discriminate against Mexicans did we make marijuana illegal, and then black jazz musicians. So it had its origins by being illegal in a discriminatory, being used as a discriminatory control mechanism.
Okay, so let's just dive. Okay? That's a good layer. So tell me the story of that in a little bit more detail, because
Well, I mean,
most people don't understand that that's what
before,
happened.
in its 20s and before 73, 50% of our medicine had cannabis in it.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's wild.
So
People don't know that.
it was super common, and because of a political ideology and the again being able to control populations that we wanted to control by jailing them, it became illegal. But Scotch is fine.
Yeah,
And then it became free love and hippies and anti-war. It became more of a cultural thing. And that's, I think, part of the reason we're still not legal now is unpacking all that baggage that people grew up with, where it was anti-war, it was anti-government, and made a political statement more than a healthy way of life, or an anti-inflammatory or anti-anxiety medicine, or a topical for your skin.
that grows naturally on Earth.
It's a plant.
Fascinating. So, and this might be misquoted, but I read somewhere this also was true, that the hemp that was being used for like textiles, like you mentioned earlier, even the cotton industry was like, oh, hell no. This is going to be a huge competition, and it's a lot more easily occurring than cotton. And so therefore, we're jumping on this bandwagon to make this
I
plant.
mean, I think the reason that Leader McConnell was so pro hemp is because Kentucky used to be the hemp capital of the United States. And the economics of hemp are still tremendous. It was everywhere in this country. And I don't know, it doesn't surprise me what you just told me, but I think that like the gaming industry now doesn't like cannabis, like tobacco doesn't like cannabis, like they think it's going to take away from their business. It's not true.
Yeah.
But there's a big resurgence now, with CBD being accepted, all around the world as an anti-inflammatory, with hempcrete and building materials being made, certainly still textiles being made of it. So I think that over the next 25 years, you're going to see a grand resurgence in hemp products globally.
It's because that generation that thinks it was the devil's lettuce is dying.
World War II generation is a tough generation, law and order generation. Just tough to. There's an argument called the gateway argument that if you try cannabis, you're going to then do harder drugs later on. Quite the opposite has been proven. That's proven false. That we're actually using cannabis to treat other addictions. So yeah, it's a very mild thing. It's a big help for those that it helps, but it's like a cup of coffee. It's very mild. It's like a mood elevator. It goes in and out of your system very quickly, and it's a very mild drug.
Absolutely. I mean, listen, there's no doubt I live in Portland for a reason, right? I'm a fan, but it's interesting because even my parents, like my mom was visiting me, and I have a water pipe that looks very elegant, looks like a Voss, really nice. By the way, you should carry it at Jenny's. It's phenomenal. And it was the first time in my life, because when I first told her I did this was like 6 years ago, and there's people who are probably listening to this for the first time going, what? Who don't even know this about me. But the fact that there's still that stigma really is the point. Long story short, it was the first time my mom kind of was going, okay, what's this about? Because I took her to a dispensary here in Portland, or like one in Jenny's, and you walk into these places and they look like an Apple store. You know what I'm saying? It looks like it's very normal here. And so she was kind of like, okay, so how does this work? And it was the first time she had opened up, but in my head, I'm like, man, there is such a strong aversion to cannabis because of all this like negative connotations and again, misconceptions. And so
I mean, a lot of it is we're pretty much law-abiding people.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of it just comes from it being illegal, and you force patients into unsafe transactions and alleys, and for people that I believe all cannabis is medicine. It's just a regulating drug. If you're anxious, it can help with that. If you're not hungry or you need appetite, it can help with that. It regulates you. If you have trouble sleeping, it reaches the area You might be perfectly tuned. You don't need it. You're fine.
Yeah.
That's really all it is. But the stigma is because it's illegal,
Yeah.
and it's a well-deserved stigma. Now, again, we have unjust laws. This has been one of them, and it's taken. I believe that we've taken the world down the wrong path with the war on drugs, and so we're trying to correct that now. The U.S. let it, locked up a bunch of people, and filled our jails full of low-level drug offenses, and now it's coming back to bite us in the ass.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think fixing this is important. For me, again, as an entrepreneur, as a business person, I just want to be able to run a business. And the lack of federal legislation has made it impossible. There's a structural impediment because these businesses are super expensive to run. So you pay more in legal, you pay more in security, you pay more in point of sale systems, you pay more for your employees, you pay more in renewal fees and licensing fees. So it's not just like a retail store. So you pay, the expenses are a lot higher. But the worst part is we can't write off any of our expenses on our taxes.
Because it's not federally legalized.
And because we're a Schedule 1 drug. So we're like heroin. So no one wants the heroin dealer to write off their taxes. And so that's the problem, is cannabis is treated in the same schedule as Schedule 1 as heroin. And so no matter how much money you make in cannabis, you can't really show a profit, because without being able to lower your taxable income, you lose money. And so that's why the cannabis is in terrible business. The 80% of the cannabis licenses are owned by large Canadian companies. In 2018, Canada went legal. So the country went legal. So they were able to list companies on the stock exchange. And so they have large public companies that bought 80% of the licenses in the US. Okay. A lot of them are based in Chicago. Those companies, they did transactions and purchases for stock and for cash. Here's the problem. This business, because of the structural deficit I told you about, it's not profitable. So it has to be propped up with investment. It's like a startup, right? Until you're able to survive on your own, you have to be propped up with investment. After all, Uber for 19 years didn't make any profit. They stayed in business for 19 years, but they didn't make any profit until last quarter of last year. Right. So 19 years, they didn't make any money. So cannabis, with those large transactions in big public companies, the problem is those stocks tanked. They went down, right? So they lost 98% of their value. So when we used to talk to people about investing in cannabis, they were excited because of the prohibition argument, because it's the next new thing, because the whole world is going to want it. And now, because they only lose money, the best of these companies lost $250 million last year. So you're talking about there's a structural deficit that you can't make a profit. So it's still an investment for the future. It's an investment for those people that believe it'll be federally legal in the U.S. and in other places in the world. After all, Germany's legal, Canada's legal, Mexico's legal, all these large countries, Uruguay's legal. These countries are going legal, and eventually the U.S. it's inevitable. It will be legal in the U.S. 26 states we have, 40 states have a medical program, so it's going to be legal. And after it's legal, we will be permitted to make a lot of money.
Yes.
But if we go out of business before then, this is 10 years. I used to do other things. So for 10 years, we've been trying to figure out how not to lose money. And finally, we figured out that we have to sell about almost 100% of our own products at 80% margins in our own stores. So you have to be vertically integrated. You have to cultivate, you have to extract, and then you have to have the retail. And if you have all three of those and you're able to see really high margins at the cash register in your own store, then you can break even.
And that's how it works. Okay, so hold on. You said a lot there that I want to dissect because it's fucking fascinating, Dave. Okay, so So first of all, let's go back to what are some of the major. Just so you know what's coming, and in case I forget, I want to ask you about the obstacles to legalization. I want to ask you about the Canadian company that we are talking about and the 80% of the licenses, and explain a little more of that. And then I want to ask you about the process that you have going at Jenny's that you know are vertically integrated. So let me just go back. So first of all, right now, is it people don't vote? Like, what's the biggest do you think challenge right now to make it federally legal in the United States?
Well, unfortunately, when President Biden won, he wasn't the greatest on this issue. World War II generation again, a believer in the gateway argument. He was supportive of medical, but wasn't supportive of adult use. He's come around, I believe, and he's been making some big moves to reschedule the drug, taking us from Schedule 1, and we believe that's imminent. That could happen this year still, right, in the next couple of months. So that would change everything. And I think that he's also pardoned marijuana convictions and expanded that. So he's coming around to the correcting the problem and correcting some of the mistakes that were made. The other reason is politics. Things happen because of momentum. And what's happening now is the federal government collects federal taxes from cannabis companies. But there's no federal Department of Cannabis. It's illegal. So all they do is collect money. They don't represent the company. All they do is take the money. So right now, the federal government can receive billions of dollars in revenue without having to do anything, without having to hire an inspector, without having to write a rule, without having to, do anything. And so why, they're making so much money that way. Now it's all on the backs of the employers, and the employers are all going out of business.
And the consumers.
No question. We've priced the average consumer out of cannabis, which is why the thriving illegal market. Furthermore, people used to get arrested for being in the illegal market in cannabis if you had a lot of plants. No more. People are afraid to arrest people that are. So if we were illegal, we'd be doing quite well. 2/3 of the market of cannabis is illegal. Once it becomes legal, we get that market. Once it's legal, we get that market. There's not a lot of bootleggers out there competing with the liquor companies. Right. So once it's legal, that market comes to us. So really, the business is all on the future of when it is federally legal. The reason it hasn't happened is there always seems to be something more important to do that no one's really fired up about doing it. If you think about it, if a large portion of the average American, the majority of Americans have access to legal cannabis now, where they are. Yeah. They have access to it now. If you knew that these people were consuming cannabis illegally, you would want to make it as safe as possible, which is what the lab tests are for. So not only for fentanyl, but for microbials. Do you really want to, smoke a bunch of mold and mildew? But the illegal market is thriving, and they're not held to the same standards as we are in how much mold per million, in how much pesticides and what kind of pesticides we can use. So it's in the worst place right now. Not only is the federal government not acting, but they're not acting against the illegal folk too. So it's as bad as you can get for the entrepreneur. What was your other question?
Yeah, just one of the biggest challenges, and then follow up with that is, can you talk a little bit more about basically the monopoly that's happening right now? Because as I understand it, the licenses and how they work in each state, because I bet you there's a bunch of people that don't really understand how this all works, and so just to give some clarity on that would be great.
Each state has offered a program. Mostly, there's only been two by referendum, two by legislation, 2 states by legislation. Everyone else has been referendum. And what that means is they have the people vote. So in Oregon, when they vote, then the legislators have to go and legislate. So the people vote first. They say we want legal cannabis, and then they have to go and write the rules to govern it. That's a merit-based application. So you compete in these states that offer. The last state that just went was Minnesota, went full adult use. So they were medical. And a lot of it is a 2-stage process. Most of the states go medical first, and then a couple years later they go into full adult use. So that's the process of it happening. And in a merit-based application, you fill out an application. There's sometimes a $5,000 fee, sometimes a $50,000 fee to apply. You hire experts to help you write your app. In the beginning, nobody had any experience, so you had to contract with others that had experience. So you do your best to win these licenses. These licenses used to be worth $10 to $20 million each. So before the crash of the market, we had 19 of them. We were doing quite well. Now those licenses became virtually worthless. So because people are going out of business, there's some in the market. So there's only so many licenses in each state, and the rules are different in each state. And so companies got big when Canada went legal in 2018. They had public funds. So by being a public company, regular people would invest, and investors thought this was good because it was a public company. It was safer to invest. So they invested a lot of money, and these companies went on to roll up and purchase most of the licenses. So you really have, 4 or 5 employers in the US that have the bulk of the employees. And they're all listed on the Canadian Stock Exchange. Like I said, they're all losing $200 to $500 million a year. They all owe $500 million in federal taxes. They're getting out of cultivation because they're bleeding out like we are. Their stock prices lost 98% of the value. Wow. So they also,
since last time I talked to
they also suffer. Well, the problem is they don't go out of business. They just closed down their cultivation because they still have access to public funds. People are now buying cheap stock.
Yeah.
But for us, it backed us up. People stopped investing in cannabis, period. And so, yeah, we have to sell some of our assets in order to bring it back in, focus on our Las Vegas market, and, grow there.
And so essentially what ended up happening is this company bought up all the licenses and kind of blocked the entry to the market from an entrepreneurial standpoint.
Correct. And also on these merit-based applications, these governments thought, well, we should take a chance. Should we take a chance on this XYZ company or this giant public company?
Yeah.
And so they ended up winning the licenses too in competitions. They also had the money to buy lobbyists and lawyers and build facilities on spec. We didn't have any of that. We just filled out the application and did our best. We were the number 4 rated in Las Vegas in the first applications. We did quite well, and then increasingly the Canadian companies all started winning in these competitions.
That's wild. And then would they lobby to not get it legalized because they're winning, or at this point is there interest?
No. They don't want to lose money. They want it to be legal as well.
So now the tables are turning, because I remember at some point I thought maybe a couple years ago when we talked about this, it was like at the point they were making a ton of money or they were doing okay, and so
revenue, not profit.
Yeah, but it didn't work out. So they want to legalize just as much.
Sure, it's exactly the same. They plan on selling to GlaxoSmithKline or a tobacco company or a liquor company or pharmaceutical company after it's federally legal. Those assets will all come back, and U.S. companies will probably own them. But they're looking for that giant transaction.
Yeah.
The thing is we have $22 million invested. They have, oh my gosh, trillions of dollars invested. So before they're in the black, they've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, no doubt. And two, there's no such thing as, antitrust laws that apply here because it's not federally legalized, so they can't even
Well, I talked to many politicians about this. How they allowed monopolies to form when, they just turned down a Kroger merger today, because it was, so antitrust is vogue, and how they allowed monopolies to form prior to legalization is an embarrassment. And in fact, Attorney General Sessions was hot on this issue, in the early days. It's shame on them.
Yeah, that's actually for the capitalistic spirit, even through the conservative side, if that's the ones that are against it the most, that's sad. So, yeah, man. Okay, so let's get more into the economics of Jenny's itself and your company. So tell us a little bit about the story of Jenny's and where you when you first started, and then what it's. Well,
let me just say, and I know we're wrapping up, but let me say that we've got you have to have a cultivation facility. If you're just a cultivator, though, you're going to go out of business. You have to have an extraction facility, but if you're just an extractor, you're going to go out of business. You have to have a retail store, but if you're just a retail store, you're going to go out of business.
Damn, man.
And so that's what's happening to a lot of these companies. They just won one retail store. They're just good growers, but because of the taxes and the margins and the crash in the market and the illegal market, that they lose money growing marijuana legally.
Yeah.
So that's the problem is cultivation CapEx is really expensive. It takes about $20 million to build, call it a 36,000 square foot facility. So
grow it.
And there's no bank loan for that. So
yeah, because
it's got to be cash. So it's almost impossible to do. Secondly, the extraction business, it takes a long time to learn how to do it. So it's equipment and expertise on the extraction business. So you can go buy the equipment, that's just money, but the experience takes about 10 years, and we've been doing it for 10 years. So we're quite good at it. It's highly lucrative, but it took 10 years to figure it out. So you got to have and it costs a couple $1,000,000 to set that business up. So one, it takes about 20 million, the other takes about 2. And then on the retail side, it takes about $1,000,000 to set that business up. You got to build out your space, start out with some inventory, and then get it running. The problem is, if you're not selling your own product in your own store, you're buying it from somebody, call it a 2-to-1 margin, so your margins are 50%, and then you have all of this heavy burden on heavy expenses. The businesses are so expensive to run, your labor's more expensive, everything's more expensive, and then the final killer is you can't write off the expenses. So that's called 280E. 280E is the tax law that I keep referring to, where we don't have any write-offs. That's the thing that kills you. So unless you're vertically integrated and you sell mostly your products in your own store at high margins, you will lose money. Now, your design might be to lose less money than others, and very few are highly profitable. The ones that will be profitable will be in a craft grow, a smaller operation, and again, seeing high margins in your own store. Yeah. And that's our approach. We're a craft operation. We grow in a unique way called deep water culture, where the plant is suspended in 18 inches of water, chilled 15 degrees below surface level, rich in oxygen, rich in nutrients. When that's done, we empty that tank out, we recycle that water, we bring it back, and we grow another crop in the same water. So it's really cool that we recycle and we reclaim our water. We harvest our dehumidification. We grow really great flower with high terpene counts, sometimes as high as 4%, usually around 3%, which is just tremendous for our industry. Mm-hmm. And also there's a consistency there. So we spent a lot of years filing patent applications for this deep water culture technology. So we've done that on the cultivation side. On the extraction side, I already told you it took 10 years to figure it out. Yeah. And then on the retail side, a lot of those people have been with us for a long time. So training your employees is that's our real valuable asset is our employees. So we give pensions, we give retirement accounts, we give free college, we give it's a union operation. So our employees unionized way early on. We're the only unionized company in Las Vegas. And they get higher hourly wage and vision and dental insurance and paternity and maternity leave. And so they all work for us for like 10 years. So I know them all. They've worked for us for a long time. We have very low turnover. And that's why we're still alive today. We're in our darkest hour right now in cannabis. We're selling assets in other states, bringing that money back in and focusing on what we do best, which is a craft approach in our Las Vegas market. But the reason we're standing is these, just tremendous employees we have.
Man. Oh, dude, I love the way that you run your business. I've really, after all the conversations I've had with you, the thing that I admire a lot of things about you, your tenacity, your willingness to do the right thing, but just the way that you operate your business, you take care of the people and you're doing it right. So that's why you're weathering the storm of crazy. Because I know for a fact that there's, and we've talked about this, there's cannabis companies that are just going under just because they can't sustain. They can't.
I'm deeply sensitive to this. I thought it would be a great thing to invest in. So I got my friends and my family and, all my close friends and family are invested in this company. I planted every plant. I hired every manager. I built every facility.
Oh, okay. We had a blip there. So you were talking about that. You're heavily invested in this. Your friends invested in this. Your family's invested in this.
Yeah, it's not like I can walk away from it. I've got fiduciary responsibility and all my money invested in it. So we're going to tough it out. We just had to make adjustments, And, luckily this great workforce we have, they're taking to these adjustments, and running with it. Yeah. So it's this creativity, this craft approach, this love of the plant. There's a great enthusiasm in people that work in cannabis. That's a big strength of ours as well.
Yeah, I mean, I that's amazing, man. So just to kind of wrap up and to kind of have some thoughts on what what your company is. Where are you located? If people are listening, that maybe that they might be all over the country right now, but where are you located?
Well, when you come to Las Vegas, we're operating out of North Las Vegas and in Henderson. We are all of our cultivation and extraction is out in Las Vegas, so that's what we're focusing on. We also are in Bend, Oregon, where we have a vertical licenses, and we have a retail store operating out of Bend, Oregon.
Yes.
We're also licensees in Maryland, in Illinois, and those are some of these assets that we're starting to look at where we're bringing that home. We're going to focus on our Las Vegas market.
That's awesome. And I can attest that the flower is above and beyond wonderful. Terpenes and all. We can get into those details maybe some other time. We'll have to.
Well, we take it seriously, and same with our extracts. We use cannabis-derived terpenes. We use only the best practices. You're only we don't use any pesticides. We're super careful. Again, we reclaim our water. We grow in deep water culture. We use LED lights. So we're trying to walk the walk. Our employees, it's the old school. You used to be able to go work for a place for 10 years and still work for the same place, get built-in raises, and have benefits. It's exciting. And again, once the federal government catches up with this philosophy that these are good jobs, that we want that this is a great way to rebuild the middle class. We hire more lawyers and engineers and cannabis consultants, but our employees are neighborhood people. And these are tremendous jobs working in small business, and people are greatly passionate about it. So, again, once the federal government fixes this, it's going to be a tremendous industry. Just watch out.
Yeah. Lastly, just for people to know, as far as facts, earlier you mentioned something that I just was curious the thoughts of it, but the economics of the industry as far as the market. How big is the market? How many people are consuming marijuana or
it's billions of dollars. Now, even the legal market, you're talking, hundreds of millions of dollars. You're talking about real market. The problem is how do you measure the illegal market? Because it's so expensive because of taxes, people go to their person in the garage, their friend that grows cannabis. And that's how it was always, right? That's how cannabis, for those of us that have been using cannabis for a long time, it was always, it was illegal. Now, having the ability to have a lab tested product, that's what I would encourage everybody. Yeah. I understand the economics, but what you put into your body matters. And I'm deathly afraid of, one of my kids sharing a joint at a concert and having it laced with something that's terrible. Yeah. So I think lab tested products are the huge benefit for cannabis users globally. Yeah. And I'm just a big proponent of it. And if you can afford it, please visit dispensaries and as little as you can, engage in the illegal market. Only because, again, just the microbials alone, just aspergillus and things that mold, you don't want to inhale that. You don't want to eat it. So this should be a food grade product. It's a connoisseur product like chocolate or coffee or wine. And for those of us with best practices, with a great love for the plant, a love for the consumer, it's an exciting business despite of the inaction of the federal government.
Yeah. And I can attest. I mean, you walk into Jenny's, and this is true for a lot of dispensaries, but I know specifically for Jenny, I've walked in, you see they have a menu and you can see percentages of everything. There's everything written down exactly what you need. They'll ask you, hey, are you having trouble sleeping? Or do you have anxiety? Is it paranoia? What's bothering you? Where does it hurt? Where does it hurt? And the expertise that your employees have to be able to say, okay, well, if that's the case, here's what we recommend. And then the efficiency of which that works is.
Thank you. I mean, it's experience. We stop short of medical claims, but we can share what our other customers have told us. So for people that have a certain disease state, we can say, this is what this person's using. They seem to work for them. You might want to try this and this. But yeah, it's through experience and seeing thousands. We've had hundreds and hundreds of lab tests, hundreds and hundreds of harvests, thousands and thousands of patients and customers go through our doors. And it's those same employees that are enthusiastic every day, greeting that customer, educating that customer. It's not a normal retail job. It's regulated retail. And these are special employees.
Damn, man. Wow, that is so cool. Dave, I just want to thank you for being on here again. I know some of these questions might be repetitive between you and I, but I think this is going to be a different audience that's going to listen to this besides people who sold books, besides Ponytails fans. And so I hope that people got a lot out of this. I know I did every time I talk to you. It's just really inspiring. But the way
it's a pleasure. You keep up the good work and bringing good stories to people. It's an honor to be on this iteration of your podcast, and I look forward to future conversations.
Yes, sir. I'll let you know once this is out. And if people are in Vegas, go find Jenny's. And if you're in Bend, Oregon, go find Jenny's. If you have questions, feel free to message us, and we'll try to relay them over to Dave to see if maybe if you want to get involved, maybe you want to invest, maybe you want to just learn a little bit more. Just let us know. Message me on my Instagram. You can see it there on the screen, ARGBMF. And then we'll put your LinkedIn on the description if that's cool. Or
sure.
That'd be all right. All right. Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. We'll end the recording here. You guys have a great rest of your day. Tune in for the next episode coming out. I'm going to try to have these out every bi-weekly, but we'll see. Thanks so much. Make sure you subscribe, like, all that stuff. We'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.